Yeah, I got about 3 minutes, so we'll start on time because we're live streaming. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're going to call the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly work session to order on Thursday, March 31st, 2022. It's 6:30 PM. We are in the Assembly chambers. Before we go into citizens' comments, I should tell anybody who wants to call in or speak here that at work sessions, we don't keep a public record, an official record. So if you want your statements to be on the official record, the next regular meeting is March 7th, April 7th, I believe, and you can have it read into the record at that time. In the meantime, if you're here, please state your name and make sure the microphone's on. If you're calling in, please also state your name and turn off or turn down whatever you're listening to us on, because it gives us really bad feedback and we can't hear you. Please keep your comments civil and please address the assembly as a whole. Don't single anybody out. Thank you. With that, we'll open citizens' comments. And we'll have a delay for those who are live streaming. Not seeing any, not seeing the phones light up. We'll close public comments and we'll go into our agenda. First item on the agenda is ARPA funding. Roxanne.
So as requested by some Borough Assembly members, we wanted to provide some clarifications regarding ARPA funding and how that was allocated. It's something that you previously approved, but there was a spreadsheet that we offered to provide more information so you have a better understanding of how we allocated some of that funding, and our finance team is here to clarify any questions you may have and present any information.
Hi, my name is Susan Zimmerman. I am an employee of the Finance Department and have been for 5 years. The lost revenue is one of the eligible uses for the federal ARPA money received by the borough. We received $1.2 million in October of 2021 and will receive 2 payments from the federal ARPA money. One of the requirements of the reporting and compliance was calculating the lost revenue for the borough. This tells us how much of the ARPA money can be used for lost revenue replacement. The revenue replacement calculator that was provided in your packet, and it was provided to us by the GFOA. It was a spreadsheet that made it easier to calculate the revenue. If you got a chance to look through it, GFOA took major categories that are normally revenue sources for municipalities and made it so we could plug our information into there. So by using this spreadsheet, what it did was made us figure out what our lost revenue was based on what we expected to occur in the absence of the pandemic. So the first 5 pages are the summary pages that'll get discussed tonight. The additional 140 pages is all of the financial reports that were used to generate the document, the easy-to-read revenue sources. All that's provided as the backup. So what was expected to do on the first page is the summary. This is the calculator working. On the second page of the spreadsheet, we were supposed to provide our revenues for the base year that was completed before the pandemic started. And so that was our fiscal year 2019. And so we were required to plug our information, all of our revenues, into this worksheet. Of course, there were exclusions. Certain revenues were not able to be used in the ARPA calculation. Refunds and other correcting calculations weren't allowed. Any proceeds from debt issuance and sale of investments. If you had utilities that you were collecting on as revenue were not considered and excluded. Sale on assets of investments. Any interfund transfers within the borough or interfund transfers between any of our funds weren't included, and any transfers from the federal government. So of course our CARES money that we received from the federal money or from the federal government was excluded in the calendar year 2020 to make this run correctly. The additional items that the KIB Finance Department excluded was our other category, our other revenue. A lot of times that's where we do put any refunds or any of those correcting calculations into when they don't fit into any of our other revenue sources. So it was easier to just exclude that altogether. In a lot of years, it's less than $200 that gets put into that other revenue calculation. So the first page, as I said, is our baseline year. So we plugged all the information into there. Then we were required to show an additional 3 years past behind that. So we showed the 2018 fiscal year, the fiscal year 2017, and 2016. So if you flip the page, then we entered all the same information into the revenue calculator there. That created our average revenue or our average growth rate, which we ended up at a 3.9 is what our average growth rate was in revenues at that point. Then the final year is the actual year, the calendar year 2020, when the pandemic started. So we had to take and cut and paste our fiscal years to fit into a calendar year, because we don't run on a calendar year, to show what had happened, and that's what calculated our actual base revenue. So if we go back to the first page, it shows our base year revenue, which was our fiscal year 2019. The federal ARPA requirements said that if our growth rate was under 4.1, we were allowed to use the 4.1 growth rate. Then it estimated what our revenue should have been without the pandemic. Of course, that's staying that our revenue stayed stable during that time. So that was the calculator's rough estimate, saying that our revenue would have stayed stable at the same growth rate. Then the actual revenue got plugged in there from calendar year 2020, our first year of the pandemic, and that's what created the amount of the 7.4 million, saying that we have the ability to use basically the whole portion of the money we received from the federal ARPA money as revenue replacement, if we choose to do so. That's only one of the options. I also included in the packet, this is the Treasury's final rule, which goes through the details of all the other sources, or all the other eligible categories that we can spend our 1.2 million times 2 in. So, let's see. Are there any questions regarding how that calculator worked and how that number was generated?
Thank you, Susan. I had the privilege of Tuesday going over some of this information with Susan, and part of it, I was looking for a little bit more detail, and there was three funds that mainly I was interested in. One was the landfill account, as to what our actual shortfall is there, severance on the seafood products, and then the tourism there. What was interesting is then yesterday going over that information, which showed that basically in Fund 530, the landfill, our revenue reduction is $1.6 million on that. On the tourism development, which included the commercial passenger vessel, it was $33,818. And on the seafood products, the severance portion, $270,975. But the biggest thing that contributes to it was the loss of our revenue on debt service reimbursement, is why we are, at $7,444,000, which means that if, as Susan said, we have the option to use it for revenue replacement for both the state at the $1,925,000 and the federal at basically $2,524,000. So it just, we've got lots of options on there, and that information told me. I thank you for helping me, and Amy was there too yesterday. So it was a good bit, and just in the tourism there and stuff like that. It was very worthwhile on there, but it helped getting the detail on those three accounts, like I said. The landfill, which would be one of the things, the severance, which goes in directly severance to general fund and the tourism. But one of the things in using money on the landfill is it helps keep rates stable in the future. So, because of the shortfalls there. So, anyway, discussion for another time, but thank you so much for all the work you did on this.
Susan, could you kind of, I'd say help my memory, but I'm not sure my memory could even find it. We got the 2.4 million, 2.1 million. Do we have to spend that before we get the second, or does it automatically come?
Question. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, we can even allocate.
So it's approximately 2.5. You have to expend or commit the first half before you get the second tranche. We have up to 1 year for that, and not trying to steal your thunder, we got the okay and the paperwork today for the 1.9 for the second for the revenue replacement. All of that massive paperwork came in this afternoon, so that fits, I believe, answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions from the assembly? Any comments from the assembly? Seeing none. We go on to general budget discussion. As you can see, you have before you the manager's budget, which is due tomorrow, so she's passed it out for our review for this coming week. I think our next work session will probably dive into that in pretty good shape. But right now, we think we have an overview on the general budget discussion that Dora is going to give us, and I can't wait.
I know, I'm thrilled. Okay, first, right off the bat, on the first page of the document is the maximum allowable property tax revenue computation. So there are two adjustments that we get to take. So if you go kind of down to the middle of the page, the note 1 adjustment shows what we had, the cap was for the prior year, what the actual collections were, and the difference is $188,000. So we're ineligible to collect that $188,000 for the next year. The note 2 exclusion is the new construction and land status changes that we can add back to the cap. So those two notes, that's $209,000. So going up to the formula on the top, take the property taxes levied less the $188,000. The maximum is for 13.3. The consumer price index increase was 4.9%. So that nets $655,000 plus the new construction means that our cap for next year is 14.2. Questions on that page? I went pretty fast. Okay. So what does that mean for us this year, for the FY23 year? If you turn your page, this color-coded spreadsheet, the green colors are the general funds, blue is the school district, and orange is debt service. The first category there is the area-wide taxes, Fund 100, 201, 469, and those are all limited by the tax cap. So the total that we collect for those funds can't be any more than the 14.237 that the first page calculated. So putting a pause on this page. The next page is the school district resolution showing what the school district informal ask is so far. So, and that's what is in the budget that staff prepared. And then the next page is the budget ordinance showing the departments and the Special Revenue and Enterprise Fund total budget asks for this year. The next section shows you staffing for this year for FY23's budget as compared to what the FY22 budget was. For the assessing department in particular, on the first section here, total number of positions budgeted for in this budget, the FY23 budget was 7, FY22 budget had 6. So as you go across, the vacant full-time position is the one that she's asking for as an increase to this budget. Clerk's office, there's no change. Community development, there's one personnel increase change for that, and that is the director position. Engineering facilities, there's 2 personnel changes there. One is a seasonal and one is the full-time maintenance director position. The finance department, no changes. Information technology, there's one change. It is a full-time position for network programmer analyst. We have 2 employees in that department that have 30 and 32 years. One is 30, the other's 32. They could step off at any time, and I'd kind of like to hire somebody to do some successional planning, and I know I'm bogarting here because nobody else gets to advocate for those positions. So, manager's office, 3 and 3. Service district for the fire chief is 1. Solid waste collections, they didn't ask for any increase in staffing. So the budget has a total of 50 positions. The FY22 budget had 46 positions, and then there's a list at the bottom of the new positions that are being asked for. The next section, any questions? Okay. The next section is a summary of what the budget has for revenues. The area-wide mill rate for this budget in front of you tonight is 10.75. You can see the reoccurring revenues. I have not budgeted for any special revenues. I felt it best to pull the special revenues out. That was a odd occurrence for revenues. We do get a fair amount of one-time revenues, but they're usually consistent. The COVID funding was not normal. For the expenses, there's actual expenses for each department from 2018 through 2021. 2022 is a partial year. And I also have the 22 adopted budget and then the 23 budget, so you can have a comparison between departments over the years. And this is just for general fund. At the bottom, you'll see a summary by category. So all the personnel costs, all of the employee benefit costs, personnel services, support goods services, capital outlays, allocation and nonprofit contributions are listed there, so you can see how over the years we have had those category expenses. Again, I pulled out some of the non-operational type issues like transfers. You'll see the large transfers starting in 2021. Those are transfers to debt service. And then the CARES money expenses for health and social services, education and business in general. Down at the bottom, I wanted to give an idea of how our payroll percentages stacked up to the other expenses that we have. Although we are labor intensive as a whole, we do have some substantial expenses that are not labor driven, such as building department. Even though we pay for the building department, we don't staff it. We pay for the animal control contract at $121,000 a year, and we don't staff that. There's the nonprofit distribution. So those are things that, large expenses that we pay out that we don't have any bodies for. So our percentage, our payroll and employee benefit percentages have been fairly consistent over the last few years, ranging from 67 to 62%. And just because it's such a large amount of our benefits, I wanted to show what the state PERS contribution rates have been. So in 2018, there were 25% of our salary went to PERS, ranging all the way up to 30.85 in 2021. And next year, they are going to, our contribution rate's 24.79. So as you look at those payroll costs, the PERS is a large contribution to those benefits. So any questions?
So basically this year, because PERS went down, we are able to add people and not really increase the budget. When I looked at the numbers from last year to the proposed budget this year, there wasn't a very big jump. And yet we were adding positions back in that had been carved out over the last couple of years.
It's a multitude of reasons, but yeah, PERS is a substantial cost. Our health insurance, last year I projected a 5% increase and we had 2%. This year I projected a 4% increase and we have 2.2% increase in healthcare. So those are things that we were budgeting for that didn't come, which was great. I'm not knocking the percentage, but those help contribute to lower those personnel costs.
So can I ask you what the bottom line is?
I think he had a question.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a couple of quick questions, if I could. So the PERS contribution, projected next year at 24.79, is that in part because the folks that we're hiring are coming in under a different PERS, so that amount is changing in that regard?
No, it doesn't matter which tier you come in at, you pay the same rate.
Okay,
This is based on actuarials that
Okay.
are determined by the state, and they've already done their resolution for the PERS costs, so I can pick those off.
and Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to go back to the personnel
Go ahead.
page for just a second. On some of those positions, those are positions that didn't necessarily go away from the budget. We didn't have applicants for it, or are those positions that we carved out entirely from last year? Or is it a little of both?
The maintenance position and the director, those were both cut last year from the budget. So those were carved out. The seasonal, I don't think they were cut. We may not have had the applicants that we wanted to fill those positions, or for the time that we wanted to keep them, depending on the weather. But those other two, I do know were cut last year.
Any other questions? Scott Smiley?
On the recurring revenues, for 2018, you have 1.8 million for severance, and in the manager's budget for 2023, 1.125. How are you calculating that?
It's just a 5-year average.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
You can make a suggestion and change that. And
I just hope that it's bigger.
Tell James to sell more fish.
Sell more fish.
Any other questions from the assembly?
so going back to the page that we had a pause on for the color-coded page. Yep. I'll let you dig into the details of the back pages line by line at your leisure. Taking the general fund expenses, total expenses of 6.282, adding a $270,000 transfer to debt service, less the revenues that we're projecting, leaves us a property tax need of 1.43. For the education support, they've asked for 11.9, that's what's in this budget. That's the property tax need. The debt service, there's the total debt service and other associated costs with debt service. estimating MVRT coming in at 240, that's probably a little low. This is estimating state reimbursements receiving 100% of what's eligible. Income of transfers from the general fund leaves us a tax need of 1.911. Those needs are transferred up to the color-coded part of the up above. And what we want to keep is that 14.237 or close to 237 number to preserve the cap. And then debt service, what is left remaining from debt service is over and above the cap limit. And it keeps the estimated mill rate at 10.75, although I will have you note that the certified values in there from last year, assessing has not completed their BOE and the other period of appeals, so we don't have an estimated value. Last year's is probably not horrifically far off, so. The main intent for the transfer to the debt service is to preserve that cap amount. If we go below that cap amount, we can't ever raise it unless it's a CPI increase or new construction and change of value in the land status. So the transfer makes it possible for us to preserve that limit. And because it all goes into the debt service fund, we're not increasing or overtaking for the debt service. The presentation I gave a week or so, well, 2 weeks or so ago, there was a deficiency in the debt service fund. I really believe we're going to get more money from the state, so I did not include a recapture of any of that deficiency in this budget. I really think that's going to happen this year. So we won't have to levy for that recoupment of the balance, the deficient balance, because I think it'll come this year. Is there any questions?
Any questions? I do see that they are working on giving us back money, and as everybody says, when we talk to the representatives and anybody else, well, it's an election year and we're rolling in oil money, so hopefully we won't have to deal with that deficit out of our tax dollars. Any other questions? James?
Not a question, just a statement. Thank you for trying to keep the mill rate at 10.75. I really appreciate the efforts on that.
I believe the next work session you have, staff might be making presentations about their budget, and will more fully tell you what's special or what's increased or what's changed in their budgets for this. So I don't have that detail. I just have the 60,000-foot aerial view.
Any other comments? Joe?
I'd just like to say this is a lot of information, and I cannot understand how you guys can put this together, so thank you for attempting to make me understand.
If you ever have any questions, please come in. Scott will tell you I don't bite too much.
Nope, it's true. It's true. Great exchanges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Scott Smiley.
I'm curious about one thing, and that's that Biden today said he's going to draw down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve by 1/3, which is 200 million barrels of oil. If that goes through the pipeline, we're going to have some money. But I don't know if we're planning on that or what's happening with that. It may be too new to know.
Scott, you got more info on that?
Yeah, that's out of the strategic reserve, so it doesn't affect Alaska. Basically, it helps replace 1 million barrels a day to replace help replace the petroleum that the United States has been getting from Russia.
But it goes through our pipeline.
No. It's in the strategic reserve is down in Texas and Louisiana,
Oh, I thought it
down
was
there in the
overflow.
salt domes. It's stored in the salt dome caverns.
Well, we could see if we can get it freighted up to,
I thought there was some up here.
yeah, oh. By the way, there was an article, I didn't get to read it, and why that we, being the state of Alaska, should take control of our oil fields, because the amount of oil flowing through the pipeline has fallen. And the gist that I got out of this when I looked at it, I just kind of scanned it, was that there's a lot more oil that could be going through there, and it could be turned to tax dollars for the state of Alaska, even at a lower rate per barrel. So if anybody comes across that article, you should read it. I'm going to go back and find it and finish it. Okay. Yeah. That's your general budget. You know, like I said, you now have a copy of the manager's budget to go through, and next work session, we will probably be doing the department by department presentation. This year, we're not going to forget the service districts, because I know Scott's not going to let me, like I did last year. And so we will try to do an orderly review of the budget, and then we'll get into crunching numbers. When I said I thought I had good news when Dora showed me some of this stuff, I like the fact that we could do all what is in there and not change the mill rate. I still think we have way too much money going into R&R, but that is a discussion we'll have at the next work session maybe, or a future work session. So with that, KIBSD budget. You guys were there for the budget presentation from the KIBSD. They have made a request for roughly 11.9. Roxanne, you got some information on that, or nothing? You have a letter from them stating that that's what they're asking for.
I provided the letter to the finance department, and that's what's included in the manager's budget. And so that's the rough estimate that we have now, along with any other information that you learned from the joint session.
Okay. Any questions on the ask from the school district, or you want to wait till we get it officially, I think, which is in 2 weeks? I think maybe that'd be better when we get it officially. Scott?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to talk about it tonight.
Yeah, I
I
don't-
don't say that normally we get at the end of April, we don't necessarily have to wait, we know what it is, but
Right.
I'm not ready to do that tonight.
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to be aware that if you didn't go to that meeting, that's what the ask is, 11.9. It was a fairly good presentation by the school district. And Larry handed out crying towels to all the members of the assembly, so it was quite entertaining. No, just joking. So right now, it's 11.9, it's in the manager's budget, and again, currently, we are looking at no raise in mill rate to fund everything at what is in the manager's budget. So that goes down to borough property leasing procedures. Have you got something together on that yet?
Yeah, I have an update verbally to provide. So I had a chance to talk to our attorney, Scott Brandt Erickson. I was very relieved that he conveyed that he has worked with other Alaskan communities on the specific process that I worked with Deputy Presiding Officer Williams on, about definitely advertising properties that we have for lease or property for lease, and through that advertisement, seeing if there are any competitive bids that would also come in with interest for that property or building. So what I have asked the attorney to do is help us with the process that we're facing right now for the mental health buildings, and figure out the steps that we have to take that could include, we need to do an environmental assessment, and then we also need to work with the people who were just leaving the facility to make sure that they're responsible for the belongings and the items that they've left in the building, because we need that diligence. And then we'll need to do inspections for the building and inspections for fire code. And then hopefully we could go through that process of advertising the property to see if there's any interest. I don't anticipate a high amount of interest, but we can definitely develop that process with a simple application, and then the assembly could make a decision about who they'd like to proceed with that process for. And then after that, the applicant of choice would then likely need to pull a permit if they wanted to make any changes to the facility. And then we're valuing whether they need to go through any kind of architectural review if they do decide to make changes to the facility, since it's borough-owned. But I just wanted to provide the update that we're working on this. Also, I have some good news that Dave Conrad was able to pull together, which is at your desk tonight, the, what we'll be looking for the environmental assessment, and we'll get that published as soon as possible. And if you have any concerns about that, you can let me know now, or you can tell me anytime. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I just have a question about the mental health buildings. Are these ones right down here? I went to high school. When I went to high school, I stayed in the dorms there. That's the only thing I have to say.
Yeah, one of the discussions was that we had an applicant that was interested in and willing to pay for the environmental surveys that are needed for the building for us. Of course, I like the idea of the applicant paying for it and turning the information over to us.
But
on
this is
there.
a borough-owned facility. We should have our choice of the contractor, is my perspective. And then if somebody would like to help us with the compensation for that, that's up to them. But these are our buildings. I think we should have our process and our RFP and our contractor that we select.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit there.
Sure.
And part of the reason being is we were looking at tearing the buildings down, which is totally different on there. I would agree with you 100%. Since we're looking at somebody repurposing them, I see here it spells out all the requirements that whoever does it has to have. So I don't think that it's necessarily something we have to go out and contract with.
We'd be publishing that, though.
You'd be publishing that in the request for proposals as I look at it for renting the facility. It would be an obligation of if we don't get any proposals,
But we first need to find out if it's habitable like that. So that's why I think it's a primary first step, in my mind.
it's been habitable for over 50 years.
We haven't had the assessment in a while.
Correct, but it's been habitable on there. The last time there was one done by the borough, when the borough remodeled the units approximately 20 years ago. There was one, if I'm not mistaken, that was done as part of that, on there, on that work.
20 years of time, things can happen, and I just want to make sure everybody's health and safety would be protected for the year that the building was built and for the safety of everyone.
Right. My problem is that if we don't get any prospective leasees, then it's a different assessment we have to do for demolition. And then we're doing it all over again, not completely all over, but we're doing it again. So I'm looking at it would not be redundant. We're basically going to be a little redundant in the way that's being proposed. I'm just trying to avoid that duplication on there, so we only do it, because if it's going to continue to be habitable like it is, there's one set of standards we have to meet. If it's going to be demolished, there's another set of standards that we have to have as far as the environmental thing. So that's my concern
Okay.
on it. So, and it also lets us get it out and see if there is interest. And if there's not, then we look at the demolishing. So,
And I was asked to fast track this RFP, so I'm trying to respond to everybody's needs for this.
right.
I agree with what Scott Smiley said last week. The fact that there is interest in, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I don't know, Scott. Anyway, the fact that there's interest in renting this out rather than tearing it down is exciting news. However, I do believe it is our facility, and we can't just, oh, you want to go ahead, do your own environmental. No, I think we need to do it. It's our building. If we have to be redundant, that'd be unfortunate. But once we get that study, it also would help a prospective lessee to know exactly what they're going to have to do to make that building, to convert it, because you can't do any work on it if it's got asbestos in it without abating the the asbestos first. So I agree with Roxanne that I think it's our building. We have to make it our building. We have to take that responsibility. And then hopefully, if somebody wants to rent it, man, we can get behind them in a hurry. Scott Smiley and then Jeff.
I think we need to do it the way the manager suggested, because I'm scared of litigation. If something goes wrong and we haven't done that, I think we're setting ourselves up to lose in court. And it's just because I don't trust lawyers.
Yeah, just a question, because I really don't know the answer at all, but if there truly are two different sets of standards, one for can the building still be inhabited, and the other for tearing it down, how complicated is it to frame or phrase an RFP to cover both processes and do it as a twofer, and figure out if we can just get the full story of the status of that building? And what would that cost potentially look like if you could do it that way?
I'll have Dave clarify.
So this assessment, the Phase 1 assessment, is required anytime you're looking at doing a remodel or tearing down. So I disagree with the redundant conversation, okay? It also has a limited time frame which can be defined. If it were to be repurposed and reoccupied, there would be certain items that may not have to be abated, i.e. asbestos or lead, if there could be a proper management plan put in place to manage the asbestos or the lead in place. The Phase 2, the limited Phase 2, we already know there is a UST that's abandoned at the site. So irregardless of whether someone actually rents this thing and remodels it, if you have that information, you can put monies together to actually remove a tank. An abandoned tank that's been listed as knowledge of having leak in its secondary containment is not getting any better, especially with the weather we have. So I understand the concern, but you can tailor these requirements to whichever path this building would go forward on. And there is, I will say, Mr. Arndt is correct, that there is a limited time that these are good for. So you have to watch that, but it's not like a month. And I don't have the exact number, but I read way too much on this today, and I know I read that number, I just can't remember it.
Any other questions? Am I correct in saying that Title 18 is pretty worthless when it comes to what we're trying to do here?
It's something that we need to take a look at, absolutely, for strengthening, for better community understanding, and for our decision-making.
So we can go through this a lot quicker next time? Yeah, I agree, okay. Yes, Jeff?
Thank you. I guess with that understanding, I would agree with Assemblymember Smiley and say I would support the manager's request. Also, for the fear of litigation, if it's our building and we're looking at having somebody occupy it, then we need to know what the status of that building is. And I think it's our property, our responsibility, and as much as I don't want to be spending money on something right now, I think it's worth doing that for our, the community and for our own protection.
Any other last comments on this? Now I got my hearing aids, I can hear myself real well. I can't tell if I turn my mic on. I may not be able to hear you, but I can hear myself.
Can I just say, too, that we'll proceed with issuing that RFP ASAP, because we understand that this is a very interesting prospect for, the whole property and for the community. So I don't want anybody to think that we're dragging our heels on it, and we're not trying to elongate the process. We wouldn't have a very long period in which we would accept the proposals for the RFP. We want to get this done quickly. And I'll keep reporting back to the Assembly about the progress of this.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne. Moving on, that's the last of our agenda items for tonight. So we go to clerk's comments. Lena, you have any comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm excited for Nova to arrive. She'll be here on Monday, so I'm very much looking forward to working with her and learning and she's got a lot of experience and knowledge that she'll be a great mentor for me. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And I also wanted to say that we did drop off applications for Prince William Sound at Comfish. We did not receive any applications. However, we did get an application this afternoon, and he is present. So when we get to that item under packet review, we could possibly have him speak to that if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I think the appointment's going to be next week. So I think our deadline was the 30th, so that they could be reviewed tonight. So if the assembly wants to talk about it, we'll talk about it under here. But I think I've already made my choice, and I think I'll lay that out before the assembly. And if they want to reopen it up, that's fine. I think that's all. Is that you done? Yep. Okay. That takes us to manager's comments.
Great. I have several things to go over tonight. I just wanted to assure the assembly that we have all the accommodations met for Nova's arrival. So she will have the borough keys in hand for the car, and we have the apartment set up. We got her a bigger bed because I got to stay in a twin bed, and she might want more than that for her and her husband when her husband arrives. So I just wanted to assure you that we'll offer her a warm welcoming, and we're very excited to have her come home. Also, just wanted to convey that during the budget presentations that we'll have with the directors, everybody will be given a chance to vie for their staffing request. So I'm grateful Dora did too, though, because she'll unfortunately have to phone in for the next meeting because she'll be on travel. So I'm glad you got to hear it from her directly, why she's interested in increasing the staffing for the IT department. Wanted to let the assembly know that I had an amazing trip to Akiak, thanks to Tyler from CANA for being the host, and it was great to meet with Dan, the mayor, and see that Akiak community through his eyes. So I'm really grateful for everything I learned through that. I also got to attend my first Chamber of Commerce meeting this week and got to go to an after-hours event at Kodiak Furniture, and that was a great opportunity to meet the Chamber folks and support that business. I also wanted to express appreciation for Comfish. I was really grateful that they allowed people to view the different forums through Zoom, because that allowed me to whistle while I worked and listen to those great updates. Also, they're going to be offering a lot of those updates through their website and through Facebook. So if anybody missed any of that information about the different discussions, that will be available. I wanted to also go over some upcoming topics that we'll have coming before the assembly, not necessarily for discussion now, but just to give you a heads up. So we're going to have a discussion on what to do with the Carluck and Larson Bay school buildings, and we'll have Scott Brandt Erickson in attendance along with staff to try to come up with some ideas on how we'll address those buildings in those communities. And we'll also have the budget presentation, and that will happen, both of those things will happen on April 14th, amongst any other items. In early June, we'll have a discussion on code enforcement issues, because we've looked at some of our top concerns that we've had from our community members about violations, and we'll be requesting possibly if you would consider some support for some fine schedule changes to try to address some of those big community concerns about code enforcement. We got some information from the National Honor Society, and they would like to put a mural on the east-facing side of our maintenance building. So I'll definitely bring that back to the assembly to see if there's interest on that mural going up on the maintenance building. Service district contracts is something that Dave is going to be helping with and will be working on to bring forward to the assembly in the very near future. I also had a discussion with staff on hazard mitigation plan updates, especially because some of the contacts have changed for the hazard mitigation plan. And more information will be forthcoming, but we're likely going to be applying for a state grant to study Burrow River flooding issues, planning and mitigation. So I hope that'll help the community areas that deal with flooding. And lastly, I wanted to report that just today I was contacted by the Friends of Baranof Park, and I got to discuss with Dan Ogg a request because they're interested in potentially gaining funding through the borough. Their ask is a $50,000 donation, but I'll be bringing that back to the assembly to see what your interests are and if that's something you would like to proceed with. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions for Roxanne? Scott Smiley.
The school district has a new facilities guy, Hargraves. I think he should be present when we're talking about Larson Bay School.
Okay, I'll make sure he's there. Thank you.
Any other questions for Roxanne? Seeing none. We'll go on to packet review. There are no awards and presentations. There's no public hearings. New business, a contract FY 2022-34 for auditing services. Roxanne or Dora.
I'll just turn it over to Dora.
Evening. Every 5 years, we do an RFP for auditors. So, yay, this is year 5. Yeah. So, this is a little fast-tracked. I'm asking that you authorize the manager to execute this contract once the appeal period has passed. The appeal period is 10 days after the intent to award, which was today. You will see this on your meeting on the 7th, which is prior to those 10 days, which is why I'm asking the motion be worded the way it is, that she be authorized to approve this provided there are no timely protests made. Part of the reason I'm trying to get things pushed onto the agenda and ready, such as this, two reasons. One, our auditors normally start their pre-audit formulation and plan in May, so I need to make sure that we have an auditor in place so they can start that prior to May. And two, as the manager mentioned, I will be on leave. Not a best choice of leave time, however, I'm getting a new granddaughter, so I'm really sorry and not sorry, but you guys are taking second place to that. So I wanted to make sure I was here to answer any questions. So in the packet or in paper this evening, you've gotten the briefest of summaries for those bid results. Until the protest period goes by, I'm not going to share the individual data. However, as you can see, there was a clear low bidder with a difference of $255,000 over the course of the 5 years. So staff is recommending that Altman Rogers be our bidder, or our contractor. Is there any questions?
Scott.
Thank you, Dora. As you know, I usually like to see the detail because it's a multi-year contract and it's almost $1 million. I understand the protest period very, very much, so I understand what you're trying to do, and I support that. Altman Rogers is our current contractor and has been for years, and has done a great job, I think, as we all, both for the school district and the Kodiak Island Borough. And this is for both, so it'll be interesting to see how, after the 10 days, I'd like to see the breakdown as to, because it'll tell what the school district and the boroughs is, because it also ties into the in-kind service amount that we do. So, thank you.
Joe.
Yes, I'm not always a fan of getting the lowest bidder because sometimes I think that you get what you pay for. But seeing the scoring that has been done, it looks like it's probably a good idea for this one to pass. I like continuity, stability, and that stuff, and it looks like they know this place pretty well. I do have experience with BDO, but that's in a different arena, so I think this looks like a good choice, and I too, like the former speaker here, I'd like to see the details as well after the process period is over.
I would like to add, even though they have been a previous auditor for the past 5 years, they do have specific independence rules where they have to trade out their seniors, they have to trade out their partners just to keep that independence. So even though they have a routine of trading out, so not everyone's traded out all at once. There are some continuing staff that continue from year to year, but some of our seniors, you have 2 seniors, one trades out 1 year, a new one comes in, and the other trades out the next year, just to preserve that independence. So even though they have been an auditor for us for a number of years, they are working to preserve that independence.
Any other comments? Scott Smiley.
I don't know much about accounting, but I do know that we've had the same group for 5 years. And the budget for the school district is significantly larger than the borough's budget. And they haven't had any problems, and we haven't had any problems. So if you like them, I like them.
Any other comments? Thank you, Dora. That takes us to resolution number FY 2022-25, approving certain unincorporated communities and their respective native village council for participation in the FY 2023 Community Assistance Program. Dora, is that you also?
Yes, it is me again, trying to get all these in before I leave. This is an annual participation agreement, a resolution that you certify for the participation of Carlick in the Community Assistance Program through the state of Alaska. They have to meet certain criteria. One is that they have a population of more than 25. The state determined that they have 26. They also have to provide 3 of the 7 services, and in the packet, there's documentation the Carlick Ira Tribal Council representative signed that they do provide minimum of 3 of those services. Last year, the amount they received was $15,789. Next year, according to the state, their participation will be a little less at $15,345. So with this, when you pass this resolution, I'll pass it on to the state, and they'll be eligible to receive their money. So there's no consequence to us financially. It is strictly a pass-through.
And this is done every year. Any questions? Okay. Move on to ordinances for introduction. Ordinance FY 2022-14, amending Borough Code regarding communication tower approval criteria. Roxanne Sema.
Good evening. So before you today is an ordinance in which Community Development is asking for you to consider to approve and amend 1745 communication towers, specifically regarding the approval criteria, which is located in 17-14570. 17-145 was adopted into code by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the KIB Assembly in 2018. This section of zoning code was intended to clarify the processes for establishing and maintaining communication towers in the borough. Staff worked with Planning and Zoning Commission to develop an ordinance to provide better clarity to applicants seeking to build or change communication towers. Prior to the adoption of 17-145, Alaska Wireless Network had submitted a variance application to erect a commercial tower on January 6, 2016. The processing of that application was delayed by a series of unfortunate circumstances, and the AWN case was not heard until July 2016, 6 months later. While this case prompted the creation of 17-145 to clarify the review process, it also limited the time for review of a communication tower application to 60 days. Communication tower conditional use permits are similar in process to other general zoning compliance issues and the standard conditional use permit applications, but they are significantly more complicated in the amount of review criteria. We're asking that at least the same amount of time, 90 days, be given to decide a communication tower CUP application, as only having 60 days to conduct all standard CUP processes and properly review the communication tower technical data is simply not sufficient. So putting that into numbers. Regular CUP has 10 conditions that we have to meet to go through. When you have a communication tower, you have to do those 10 criteria and an additional 13 sets of criteria to go through, and applications that are no less than maybe this thick, but they're huge, and they're FAA and SEC applications that are required for us to go through. And the way it sits to improve one tower, we have 30 days less time to do that than a regular CUP that's 90 days. The updated ordinance was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 23rd. And just so you know, we do have an application that we just received that will be going to the commission in May. So no pressure, but we need you to approve this before that hearing.
Okay, thank you, Seema. Questions, comments, Scott?
I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2016, and I was the chair at that time also. I agree with this change very much. It was the Assembly who arbitrarily changed it on this, and this makes it more workable and brings it into line with what we were working with before. So I support this 100%, and I've spoke with SEMA about it too. So thank you.
So in
for bringing it up.
2016, you read, the P&Z recommended 90 days.
No, we recommended denial of the tower.
Oh,
The GCI basically appealed that to the Assembly, and what they were doing was threatening suing the Kodiak Island Borough, and this was done as part of that. The problem was the fall protection. There was existing structures that were within that zone, and that was the problem.
Scott Smiley.
I was on the assembly when that happened, just for fun. And there were two mitigating factors. Number one was the location of where they wanted to have the tower and some ownership issues and things around the site of the tower. But it was also close to the airport, and there were height limitations due to that. I agree with this change here. It was a nightmare trying to deal with it the last time. Let's fix it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, thank you, Seema.
Thank you.
And that brings us to ordinance number FY 2022-16, establishing an opioid settlement fund. Roxanne, Dora,
Evening. Shortly, we will be receiving the first settlement of, for opioid funds. This is a process that's going to last 15 to 18 years. And so in order to conform to the reporting and make sure that we are using the revenue in ways in which is appropriate, I think setting up a separate fund for this is in the borough's best interest, and that's what this ordinance will do. So this is the first of 4 meetings in which you'll see this. I'll be at these 2, and then you're on your own. I know I keep taking that in, right? If you have any questions? I know, Mr. Smiley, you weren't happy with the way the settlement was, but that doesn't have anything to do with the funds being in a separate account.
Scott Smiley, and then Jeff.
Can we keep it in an account and accrue it over the 18 years that they're talking about, so we have some substantial money?
I'm not sure what the regulations are yet. I think they've set the parameters for the settlement, but I don't know that they've set the parameters for the use yet, other than to say there's going to be restrictions. So I don't know if it's something you can collect and then use in one lump sum, or if you have to pay it out along the way. I think that'll come more when we get the reporting instructions, but I want to make sure that we do have the clear, especially since it's a length of time involved.
Okay. I'm with you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I guess this is more of just a soapbox stand for a minute rather than really a question, but if I have to form it in the phrase of a question, I'll figure that out as I go. when we first talked about this, 6 months ago, I said then, and I'll say it again next week on the record, but I think it's very short-sighted of the state to look at a pocket of money of $49 million in the crisis in our state as a result of this, and to parse out $10,000 annually to a municipality to do something with. I think we're missing the boat, and I think the harm that's been done in our community is far greater than what $10,000 a year is going to do for us. And I would much rather see us partner with another community. I'd much rather see us say to the state, take this money and do something useful with it on a statewide level, rather than put a little bit of money out there that, where are we going to go with this? What are we going to accomplish with this? And I struggle with that, and I still struggle with this. I don't have a problem with what you're proposing for accounting purposes of that. I just have a problem with the overall rollout.
I think you echo probably everybody at this diocese feelings on that. James?
I know we haven't gotten the information on how we can spend it, but as I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, months, this is a perfect opportunity to take some of the funds out of our, now I can't even think, our donations to camp per se, because that is a drug-related use. They basically support some of the rehab that we have going on in the community, and that sounds like this money could be put towards that at some point. Maybe not right away, but once we get the guidelines on how it can be spent, that is kind of how I see this money being spent in this community. And then we can use those funds that we don't take out of the, can't even think of the term right now, but put those back into other nonprofits.
Jeff?
If I could, one final thought, and I thought about this the other day as I was reading through this, and I just wonder if, when we find out what the regulations say or what the appropriate use might be, there's a part of me that's inclined to say if there's a way for us to provide a scholarship, let's say to a graduating high school senior, that we're willing to pay $10,000 annually towards their education, towards getting a degree in chemical dependency counseling or some related therapy in that regard, with the condition that upon graduation, they're willing to come back and provide services in this community for a period of time. I would love to be doing something like that that supports somebody that's from our community, that's going to reside in our community, that may provide meaningful services to those individuals that have been impacted. I was just trying to think, what do you do with $10,000, right, that actually might make meaningful change in the future? So just another little bit of a ramble.
Any other comments? Moving on to other items. Confirmation of appointment Prince William Sound. As I said, yesterday I had my line drawn in the sand, and I know that a couple of members of the assembly had indicated they were willing to serve, and Amy was particularly pressing me, Amy Williams, and she's not here tonight. I pretty much told her that as of yesterday, she would be my appointment. Now, if the assembly would like me to consider any other applications that came in today, I will do that, but I think the assembly earlier said they prefer a member of the assembly anyway, so that's going to be my appointment recommendation for Prince William Sound. And then for Parks and Rec, we got Benjamin Vincent applied for that, and he's excited to get into it, so I'm going to appoint him, see if we can't get enough people on that we actually can have meetings. So with that, we go to Assembly members' comments. I think I started with you last time, Scott, so James, of course, you moved around.
Yeah, somebody's sitting in my seat.
First come, first serve.
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Scott Smiley.
I attended the school board meeting on Monday. It was informative. I think we heard a bunch about the libraries and about the middle school. The relationship between the school board and the Borough Assembly is close, and it should be. It should consist that way. All in all, it was an informative meeting. So thanks, that's all I have.
Jared.
Not much other than I think I got my beach read this year. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
It goes well with a cocktail. Joe.
Yes, I'm excited to see that the manager is making it out to the villages, and also that the assembly members are starting to go out there as well. I think that'll help to heal some of the old wounds that have existed. I think I'm excited to see that. I'm also glad to have gotten this budget as well. It's hard for me to understand this stuff, but I'm grateful for the staff that are here to help me to understand, because I like how you guys can put it down at a fourth grade level at which I can understand, so thank you.
Jeff.
Nothing further tonight, thank you.
Scott.
No further comment, thank you.
Okay, my comments, I along with Lena am happy, and Roxanne, probably everybody here, that Nova has coming back to fill in for us for quite a time here, and just in time. We're having we're having a special election in June, so it's just in time. I'm happy for the news from Dora. I'm always happy to hear good news, and I considered that good news. Other than that, I will be gone starting Sunday night until Thursday night. Next week, I have a State Assessment Review Board meeting. We're having a hearing, and I've got 5 binders that thick I have to read between now and Monday morning on briefs. So talk about lawyers. I'm going to see a whole passel of them. So I will probably miss the meeting next week. I think Amy will be back, and I've already told her she'll be in charge. Keep you guys from getting too unruly.
Can she make a mayoral appointment of herself?
Yes.
Yes,
She
because
can, as
it's
deputy presiding.
it's a vote of the assembly. Otherwise, I'm going to have to call in for that, because we want to get it done, because we're up against the deadline. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.